The second way, and extremely important way of sustaining love, is making that shift from the desire to be validated to the desire to be known. This advice that I got from David Schnark in his book Passionate Marriage, this single advice has quite literally transformed my relationships. Whether it's my romantic relationship with my wife or my relationship with my friends, family members, as well as students. And I've mentioned this before, and I want to go into more depth here because it is so crucial for sustaining passion, for sustaining friendship, for sustaining happiness, individual, intrapersonal, as well as interpersonal happiness. So what does that mean? What does being known rather than being validated mean? First of all, one thing that David Schnark and others have shown is that if we want to sustain passion beyond the honeymoon phase, beyond the time when it's automatic, what we need to do is form deeper levels of intimacy. And couples, again, now we're studying the couples who have been together for 20, 30, 40 years and still have a passionate relationship. Couples who do that, the tip of the stem, unfortunately, but couples who do that have cultivated and continue to cultivate, not find, cultivate intimacy throughout their lives. And how do you cultivate intimacy? By getting to know one another more and more and more deeply, more meaningfully, by understanding one another, by getting to know one another as we know ourselves. And that means that if we are up to be known by the other partner, that means we must open up. That means we must reveal. That means we need to share of ourselves. Not just the wonderful and the amazing and the terrific things that we share on the first date. That too. But in addition, also the things that sometimes we're not that proud of. Our weaknesses, perhaps. Some of the things that maybe we're ashamed of. That we don't feel very comfortable revealing, that no one knows about us. Now that does not happen on the first date. It shouldn't happen on the first date. Very often it doesn't happen after 5 or 10 years. It happens gradually over time as trust increases. And we reveal more and more. Sometimes we reveal things about ourselves that we didn't even know existed, that we repressed or suppressed over time. But it takes time, which is why, going back to David Schnark's quote about cellulites and sexual potential, that usually happens after 10, 20, 30, and which is why at the age of 50 and 60, there is even better sexual potential than at the age of 18 or 20 or 30. Doesn't mean it can be great at 18, 20, and 30. But it can be even greater. Why? Because deeper levels of intimacy, deeper level of connectedness. A lot to look forward to if we understand what is the nature of a passionate relationship. It cannot just rely on, well, we came together, I found my prince, princess charming, and then we'll live happily ever after. No, it means also taking risks at times. It means revealing over time our deepest desires, our deepest fantasies, our greatest strengths, as well as our weaknesses, our insecurities, and our passions. That's what it means to be revealed, to open up, to share. What it means is that a healthy relationship is about expressing ourselves rather than trying to constantly impress. This is the difference between being known, express, versus being validated. Let me impress her. Let me impress him. Let me impress them. The thing about this is that, yes, it is more risky to open up, to express ourselves, because what if she doesn't like me? What if he doesn't like what he finds out about me? But you see, when we express, we're more likely to have a thriving relationship. It's not guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination. It's not guaranteed. However, if we just impress, we are guaranteed failure. Here is why. First of all, when we express, generally, over time, maybe not in the short term, but over time, people will be more attracted to us. Specifically, my partner will like me even more over time because there are deeper levels of intimacy, even if they sometimes find out things that they don't necessarily like or adore or appreciate. Over time, it's people who are genuine who attract other people. And by the way, this applies in the realm, of course, of interpersonal romantic relationships. It applies in the realm of friendships, and it applies in the realm of leadership. The greatest leaders, as Peter Drucker has illustrated, are not the people who are the most charismatic. They're not the people who are the most engaging. They're the people who have the highest levels of integrity. These are the leaders whom followers follow over time in the long term. So whether it's interpersonal group relationships or individual relationships, when we express ourselves, we're much more likely to thrive. The second thing, though, that's important to keep in mind is that, let's say I impress and I do such a good job of it that the other person or the other group actually likes me. It worked. I won. Well, have I? Who do they really like? Do they like me, or do they like that image, that facade that I put on? In other words, it's not me that they really like. And it may look like it, but it's pretense, it's make-believe. It's not the real thing. In other words, I lose. And it certainly cannot sustain itself over time. So we have more likelihood of succeeding when we express, and zero likelihood of succeeding in the long term when our primary objective is impress. Now, this does not mean going on a first date and not trying to impress. I mean, I've not met anyone who has not tried to impress on a first day or a 10th or after 10 years. That's okay. However, what is the primary motivator in our time being together? Just like we reveal, we open up, and we share, we also need to get and make an active effort to get to know our partner, to know what their favorite wine is, what their favorite flowers are, where they like to be tickled, where they like to be touched. What are their fears? What are their desires? When is a good time to maybe give them their own space? When is a good time to talk to them? When is a good time to touch them? And all these things take time. It doesn't happen on the first date. It doesn't happen in the first year. And it doesn't all happen in the first 10 years or 30 years. That's what it means to create a lifelong, thriving relationship, that we get to know the other person throughout our lives. My grandfather and grandmother, my role models when it comes to relationship, got to know each other deeper and better after 50 years as well. They did not thrive, they were thriving. They did not succeed, they were succeeding, growing together. David Schnark. Intimacy is about letting yourself really be known, including parts that you or your partner don't like. But it's not just about letting warts be known. It often involves showing strengths you've been hiding too. Most approaches focus on getting your partner's validation and acceptance when you disclose. But you can't count on this. And if you try, it inherently limits self-disclosure because you won't say things your partner won't validate. Resolving gridlock requires intimacy based on validating yourself. Many, if not most, couples counselors, sex therapists, believe that the most important thing in a relationship, in a healthy long-term relationship, is that the partners validate one another. And that is important. Of course I want to be validated by my partner. Of course I validate my partner. However, that's not the foundation of a healthy relationship. And this is where most therapists, most couples are wrong. This is where I was wrong. Not understanding that the foundation is to be known. whether it's in a romantic relationship or a relationship with friends. You see, when you disclose, you are taking a risk. And very often it leads to a conflict, a disagreement, dis-ease in the relationship. However, usually, not always, but usually that is a temporary dis-ease. On the other hand, if you disclose over time and you open up and you share, that's when you lead to long-lasting positive consequences to the relationship. So on the one hand, when you disclose, it's uncomfortable by definition. If it was comfortable, then it wouldn't be hard, wouldn't be real disclosure. It's difficult in the short term, but in the long term, it leads to growth. So the question is, what do you want? Do you want a temporary feeling good, oh, you're validated, you're wonderful, and let me impress and show you how terrific I am, because it feels good to be validated? Or are you looking for long-term, thriving interpersonal friendships or romantic relationships? That is the question. Now, I said earlier, and I spoke about it a couple of months ago, I want to repeat it, how it changed my relationship with my students, how it changed, transformed my teaching. Because when I started to teach, my main goal, whether it was explicit, and at times it was explicit, but mostly on the subconscious level, was to be validated. I really wanted my students to like me. That was my primary goal, my primary objective. Over time, as I read Schnarch specifically, as well as looking at other people's work such as Parker Palmer's The Courage to Teach, my objective changed to be known. This is my mantra now. Every day before I stand here and talk to you, every single day, I think about and read my mantra. In fact, on the first page of my notes, these are my notes, my cheat sheet. On the top, be known. Every day, to be known rather than to be validated. That has transformed my relationship with my students and my teaching for various reasons. First of all, it's so stressful, enervating to think constantly I have to impress, whether it's my romantic partner or 650 or 1,000 students. It's difficult. There's a lot of pressure there. It is much easier to stand up here and say, okay, what I want the students to do is to get to know me better. And that means to get to know the field that I'm so passionate and so caring about. I want them to know me better. So I feel so much lighter about it. I feel so much lighter about it in my interaction with Tommy, when it's about being known rather than impressing, rather than being validated. That's the first important thing. The second thing about trying to impress constantly is that we put on a facade, an act, and then I tried, if I want to be validated constantly, to seem perfect so that the students really like me and approve of me. But then what I'm doing is I'm hurting the students as well, because if I'm good at it, if I'm good at putting up the facade and depicting this perfect teacher, I'm being a terrible role model, which in the long term will only hurt the students. Because that thing doesn't exist, and if anyone aspires to this perfection, whether in a relationship, whether on the individual level, it inevitably is a prescription for perfectionism, hence for failure, hence for unhappiness. Whereas if I'm here to be known, which means my weaknesses, my failures, whether it's my failure in Cambridge, my failure here, whether it's the anxiety, then you see a real person. Whether it's the mistakes, you see a real person. And that's a much better teacher, much more accessible, I hope, than the facade perfect who is there about to be validated. And again, beyond the fact that it's so much more fun for me being here, because what I'm doing now is sharing with you. Obviously, I'm sharing parts of myself with you, and I'm sharing the field that I'm so passionate about and care about so much. To be known rather than to be validated. Easier said than done. But the benefits, especially the long-term benefits, are immense. absolutely immense.